Cool. Well, nice to meet you guys both. I want to ask you, because we get glimpses of your character throughout all the different decades, but I want to know, for you as an actress, are there elements that you filled in about her life that we don't see on camera? Like, are there one or two things that would kind of surprise us that you made up about her?
Oh gosh, that's such a good, stimulating question that I haven't thought about yet. But yeah, you know, there's so many decades I had to fill. You know, we get to see her in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, but like 70s, 80s, 90s, I think we only skipped it because the fashion was not so great.
Oh, come on, we should have done that.
I know,
awesome.
Right? 80s Adaline, you know, with the rubber. Anyway.
Whole different movie.
I know,
I
yeah,
want to see her at a
it just,
Nirvana
like,
concert in the 90s. That's
but yeah, you know, there's different loves of her life that you imagine that that she would have lost, and you imagine what it'd be like to lose her husband. You don't. It sort of touches on that, the father of her child. You know, but that really informs who she is. But also, you look at what was happening in the world socially and politically in the 1940s. I mean, living through that informs who you are so much as a person. We don't touch on that in this movie, but all of those different decades, from the woman who lived that in the 20s, the woman who lived through the 60s, and you know, free love and all of that, that would be really that would be confusing to be in your youth during all of those years, you know, because when you're in your youth, you're like right in it.
Because when you started this movie, you were not a mother yet, and now we're doing press for it, and you've seen the movie, you are a mother. Is there a different emotional experience of playing the character before you were a mom and then watching it now that you are a mom?
I don't think I've
Nice question.
watched it since I've been a mother.
Really?
But I was pregnant when I was shooting.
Right,
so
I knew that.
I was
Yeah.
still kind of a mother.
That's true.
You know, so, but I mean, everything is different now that you're like, it's just like cars. You're like, these are hazards.
Right?
There's a door that leads outside. That's a hazard, you know? So I think that, like, yes, I'd be more emotional thinking of like being alive while my child is 80 years old. That would be harder now that I've looked in her face. But I've always sort of been innately a mom. I have lots of nieces and nephews and come from a big Southern family.
Now, I'm a big nerd about Game of Thrones, but I'll reference it to this movie as well, because you both worked on television shows, and I watched you on Game of Thrones, and I want to ask you, building a character in a TV show where you get multiple episodes, multiple arcs, and you get to kind of deal with the character over hours upon television versus a movie where you get two. Can you explain that difference of like building a character in that environment versus a TV show?
Yes, well, obviously, you know, when you're working on a TV show, one of the big differences is you don't really know where the arc is going, right? And in this case, the fun thing about building a character for a movie is that you really have a sense of, okay, this is where we start, this is where we want to be at the end of the movie. So how are we gonna layer it out and all that stuff? It's you know, that's I love doing both.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed doing it on the Age of Adeline.
So thank you for letting me nerd out with you
Thank
guys.
you.
And that younger Harrison Ford, oh my gosh.
Crazy, right?
The most insane younger casting I've
Yeah,
ever seen in my
yeah.
life. By the way, best younger casting ever.
Thank you, yes.
How did you find the Harrison Ford kid? I mean, that is the voice, the face,
I know,
everything.
it's crazy, right? I mean, listen, we got lucky. Someone last 2 nights ago at a Q&A asked why we did CG face replacement to get the young Harrison Ford, because he thought it was a face replacement. Anthony Gruber is his name. We found him online. I found him just literally doing Harrison Ford impersonations, but he was also an actor. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but the sort of distilled version of this is he was a huge Harrison Ford fan growing up, dressed as Indiana Jones every Halloween from 7 to 15 years old, and as he hit puberty, his friend said, you know, you kind of look like Harrison, and his voice dropped, and oh my God, you kind of sound like Harrison. And he started working on impersonations. He moved around. His parents were diplomats. He moved around a lot. Make a long story short, he ended up becoming this really gifted Harrison Ford impersonator while he was, you know, studying to be an actor. And we found him online. Some blogger, and thank goodness I found this person and thank this blogger, whoever he was. He said this guy should be the next Han Solo if there's a young Han Solo in the new, you know, in the Star Wars reboot. And I saw him and we just said we gotta find this guy. So I called him up and I said, do you want to play, you know, your hero and make out with Blake Lively? And lo and behold, he was available to do that. So
who wouldn't be available for that?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm a big nerd about how movies are made, so I kind of want to know how you did the car crash sequences.
Yeah.
So there's one particular shot, which I won't say what it is, but it looked like it was a one shot where the car was impacted and then flipping. How did you get that shot? How did you do that?
Thanks for asking that. No, it's meant to look like one shot. Where that was the hope anyway, and it's actually 4 shots stitched together. So it's Blake in a car making the turn, not being hit. It's then the stunt driver doing the same thing but actually being hit. And then we did another shot with the stunt driver on what they call a round table rig, where it's literally it's a big round table and it's just spinning the car. They use them for car commercials.
And then the camera's kind of like sideways.
And it's just mounted to the passenger side of the car. So we had to measure where the camera was going to be for all these so we could match it as closely as we could. And then we shot a plate of a stunt double being pulled out of the car, same lens, same focal, stop, etc. And then we stitched all 4 together in post. But we didn't have to do that much manipulation just because we knew we wanted it to look like one shot. So my camera department, they were stellar, and they made sure everything was just so that it was really, really close.
Now, did you shoot the film digitally?
We did.
And what I want to ask about that is because when we go back to like the earlier decades, it looks like film.
Yes.
And was that the idea of kind of making it look 35? How did you achieve that look?
There was a piece we actually shot some hand cranked film. I had to fight for that because part of the problem is there's not any place to process film anymore. We were in Vancouver for a lot of the shoot, and crazy as it sounds, there's not a lab in Vancouver anymore. And so we had to ship film back to Los Angeles, which of course producers are always a little bit nervous about. But for the other vignettes, we were shooting digitally, and primarily it was cranking up the ASA, so the speed is a little bit higher, which usually brings a little grain into the image, and it just softens it. We also tried to shoot with lenses that were appropriate to the period. So in other words, for the 60s stuff, we wanted to shoot anamorphic, but we didn't want to shoot with the new anamorphic lenses that we shot most of the film with. We shot with the old Kawa glass, which is a 60s anamorphic glass, which is a little bit softer. There's aberrations in the lens that a lot of people think are kind of mistakes, but it brings the charm to that.
The lens flares?
Yeah.
I love the lens flares.
Me too. But you'll go from a 45mm lens to a 75mm lens, and the flares will be different.
Yeah.
And some people don't like that. I love that.
Me too.
And also just opening up those lenses so that they were shooting wide open most of the time will kind of vignette the edges a little bit. The lenses don't resolve unless you're like dead center of the image, but that vignetting I really like. It sort of focuses the eye a bit and gives you that sort of old cinemascope feel of How to Marry a Millionaire, or some of the old Doris Day movies like Pillow Talk. That's true like sort of Technicolor, old Technicolor cinemascope movies.
By the way.